Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Pears video. A couple of quick reminders. If you're on day 2 and you left your stuff out from the day before, it's a good time to dump out your water dishes or your water cups and put fresh water into them. As a reminder, my brushes are all rounds for this project. They are rosemary snowdrop watercolor brushes, and they range in size from 4 to 14. My palette is the same colors that were out yesterday, which are cobalt blue, Payne's gray, pyrrole red medium, sap green, primrose yellow cadmium, and transparent orange pyrrole, all from the core watercolor set from Golden. As a reminder, this is the demo from my class last week. This is what we are keeping in mind while we work on this project. I have made changes. I've brought the shadow line up higher, the background line, and at least to start with. That's about it. It won't be exactly the same. One of the things that I find when I work on these videos, I find that in order to get the camera to position to show what I want you to see, I have to work further away from my work than I'm used to working. It's not a big deal, but I just find that compared to my finished studio pieces, these videos are a little bit sloppier. The finished painting, the edges tend to be a little bit rougher. Sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't, but I wanted to make you aware of it. That said, we're going to get started. And all right, this is where we left off yesterday. What do I want to do first? Looking at the photograph, I think what I want to do is work on the pear on the right hand side just a little bit. A little bit more red and orange and green. I'm going to grab my number 10 brush, and I have to wake up my paints a little bit. I might as well do all of them while I'm thinking of it. Doesn't take much to bring them back to life, just a little water. I probably need to strengthen up my blue, but I can do that when I need blue. Well, I'm right here now. I definitely have to add some more blue to that palette. Yeah, the tin itself, I'm running a little low. Alright, so we've got a little blue in there. Each time I rinse the brush, I'm rinsing it in the dirty, then going to the clean to pick up fresh water so I don't contaminate these too much in the wells. I'm still trying to keep them pretty pure in the wells. We'll see how that lasts. Alright, so now we have everything ready to paint. We have our paper towel, we have our sopping brush or our tea towel. I have my toothbrush for when we will be working on the spatters, and the spatters are really in the very later stages. So one of the things I see is that I want to adjust this dark color to more red than what's on there right now, which is good because it gives me a chance to darken it too. Alright, now you see I put that wash in there. I'm going to wash out my brush and I'm going to dry it out most of the way. It should only be damp. And this is what I wanted to show you guys about as you get into the darker layers or the later stages. You want to soften that edge between the new wash and the old wash. And you do that by putting your wash down, drying out your brush on your towel, and then picking up some of the paint at the edges. It's really not any more difficult than that. You just want to give it a soft edge. It's called half toning when you do that, so that you get a dark transitioning into a lighter area or one color into another. Take a sip of coffee. All right. So let's get a little orange going up here. And one of the things you will find is that even though you're putting down new color, a lot of that color that's underneath is still going to show. I've switched to more red in my brush than the orange, and doing it all in one wash so that you get a transition. Working around those highlights. This is still going to get darker, but I want to get that red color more correct in there first. Dirty brush cup, clean brush cup. Now I'm picking up some green. Again, going around those highlights. And I've kept that edge wet so that they mingle together and you get a nice blend without trying too hard. And one of the other things I've noticed in looking at the photo is that there's a light side. Light is being kicked in from this other pair. So I'm going to do that whole halftone trick on this side. So even though it's the side away from the light and it's the darker side, you have to consider all the light around your object, or what is next to your object that can kick light in. We have it going on back here too in this one, but I'm changing that up, and as you can see, I'm darker. I'm using that as a way to push that pair forward. Okay. One of the things that happens when you put I do really like that transition, that orange, red, green, and then lightening up on the other side. I think that's really effective. While I'm at it, I'll take some water out of my brush and just try to soften up the edges on this highlight. I don't want to go so hard that it blossoms and runs. All I'm trying to do is just soften those edges a little bit. They're hard edged, but they also are soft. It's not perfectly hard. Now what I think we'll do is build up some more of the yellow color. On this pair, and I can do that, and I can make this one more saturated because I've made that one behind it darker. That's what allows me to have that strong color. And in order to not have a funny line, I'm actually just gonna take this yellow glaze and bring it over into the darker pear. Be mindful of your bead at the bottom of the pear. If you have to tap out your brush onto the towel, go ahead and do that. You absolutely want to not let that run away, especially if we're going to keep that whole side there. If we're going to keep that whole bottom of the painting white and the shadow, at this point we don't want that red to run down. And you see, because we made that darker, it allowed us to be able to make that more saturated. It's still light, but it's got some saturation to it. The pears are coming together really nicely at this point. I'm really, really, really happy with them. One or two more tweaks after this is dry, because again, we can come in with even more red and darker here. Pick up that bead. You don't want it to run away from you. And again, we're going to half tone this up at the top. So rinse out my brush in the dirty water bucket, then into the clean, and then take the water out of it on your tea towel and wiggle your brush around at the edge. That's how you get that softer edge on the darker passes. What will really finish these pears off and make them sing is gonna be, one of the things I'm noticing is that this highlight that I have marked is diffused in the painting or in the photo. It's not super strong, so I'm just putting some color into there now while it's wet. That's one of those checks you make. You know, is this too light? Is this too dark? In reality, this highlight should be softer. And I can kind of achieve that by throwing a tiny bit of that yellow in there so it's not quite so white. The placement of that is a little off, but that's okay. I can either make an adjustment with white paint later, or it'll be what it'll be. That's a good chunk of the pears for now. What will really bring these to life is when I spatter in these red bits on this one, these red bits on this one, and then after we have the background in completely, painting in the stems. That will really push us over into that really perfect state. Now that may look funny, but I'm going to soften it all out. I just wanted to remember to do it. Okay. Pears are really starting to have a 3D quality to them. I like them very much. I'm going to dry this, so I'm going to stop the video. I will dry this, and then we'll focus on the plate a little bit more and the shadows and the background. And from here on out, this is how we're going to alternate. Pears, shadows and background, Pears, shadows and background, until we get that just right balance in the lights and the darks. I got to tell you right now, I think the Pears are very close to where I want them. So we'll see how many passes we have to do with the shadows and the backgrounds. But get yourself to this point. Get yourself a cup of coffee, although through the magic of video, I'll be back in a second. And we'll take it from there. Okay, welcome back. We are going to be working on the shadows behind this pair, pushing behind the plate. That will push the plate forward and give it some more dimension. A little bit of tone in here, this shadow, and darken the background up a little bit and play with the colors in the background. I said I was really happy with the Pears, and I stick to that, but if you look at here and you look at here, there's a whole nother level of darkness that goes on. That'll be done with some Payne's gray and half toning to really push this pair forward. So we'll do that. That'll probably be the next bit we do on the Pears. But let's get a little bit of shadow action going on. So I took some Payne's gray and a little ultramarine blue, put it into a well that already had some red and orange into it, so it's got a lot of the colors that we have going on. And one of the things that happens when you get further into your painting is that you start to paint with a smaller brush. You're doing more detail work. If I was really brave, I could do this shadow and the halftone right away, together, the halftone in the pair. But I like to keep this stuff kind of separated, and I am doing a little halftone right here on this shadow, softening up the edge of it. I'm going to put some dark Payne's gray in my brush, because right here and under here, this is where the shadow is darkest, and it gets softer. So we just do that. This shadow is creeping away from me a little bit. It's going a little further down than I want. So I'll just use my paper towel and just soften that out a little bit. And then come in with that dark shadow color again. This time I've tapped it out on my tea towel, so I'm not letting it run as much. I'm just letting it get into there. And I clean out my brush because I got a little bit into the pear. I'm just gonna pick that up, and then I'll just soften this edge, and voila. All right, and that color may be a little neutral for that shadow, but I think it works. And there's a shadow on the plate here that helps make that rim whiter. And I'll take that right into that bottom shadow. And over here, it does this. And at this point, really the whole of the plate is in the shadow. And then this shadow goes right up to that white edge and goes right up to the pear. And in this case, I'm making that shadow hard edge because it's a cast shadow, and I'm making it more blue than I am gray for some interest. I like that darkness. I may decide I need to bring the background down almost to here, because that will give this something to sit off against. While I'm here, let's work on the shadow that is cast by the plate. And I will soften it as it gets out. And that white bit really is not there. If you look at the plate, it really melts into the shadow. So I'm just going to take that out. And I want to pull this bit of shadow down. Oops. Get that out of the pear. Okay. There we go. Even some more dimension. Now that this is more dry and won't run as much, I can get this darker in this spot here, because it's definitely darker in here. Dry out my brush, and then come in and pick up that paint on the edge. We're doing just like we do when we dry out the bead. It's the same move with a thirsty brush. There we go. Clean out your brush and then dry it on the towel. And then just like you're picking up a bead. That's all you're doing. There's no bead here. There's just an edge. But if it's a cast shadow, it gets lighter as it goes further out. And it gets softer. All right. Now, let's really think about that background. What do we want to do? I'm thinking about starting it here so that I can bring color right up to that edge of the plate, because you've got this white bit that catches the light all the way around there, and it doesn't really show off. I mean, we could put an ink line in. I think that would ruin it. So what I'm thinking is we'll just bring the background to maybe here. I'm going to grab a bigger brush. And I need to get more color onto my palette. It's also a little bit thicker at this point. As you go, your washes get stronger. And I've just decided to recharge the whole palette. I'd like all of my options available to me. And that's a good thing to. This was we grabbed a handhold. You know, if we're gonna stick with that rock climbing analogy, we've gotten to a clearing. We've had a chance to look around. We've mapped out where we're going to go for our next couple of steps. And we're preparing, both mentally and checking our supplies before we make that next descent. Oops. That's the washing machine. It's washing day here in the Stoveland house. I could have done this painting with a warmer yellow, but I do like this palette of colors. And I just warm up the yellow as I need to when I'm painting. And that works just fine. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my paper. And I'm going to wet it to the outside edge of the plate and along the pear. I'm going to get that nice and wet. We still want to be able to get the color in there, but we want to have a good ground to get started on. We'll work around from this side to that side. And for now, I'm picking up Payne's Gray. As we get further up, I'm going to add some blue into that gray. And now is a chance where we can start to carve out the correct shape of those pears if we didn't fill in the whole area. And I've got to keep that bead wet. Now I've added some red into my mixture just to give it a little variety, and I'm keeping things moving. That's the other thing I need to do at this point, is I don't want this paint to dry out. I don't want to get any hard edges in the background that would detract. And I can already see that I'm going to wind up doing this background at least one more time to get to the strength I want it to be. But at this point, I should be working on getting the shapes of the pears right and getting my color in there. And it will be darkest at the points where between the pears and behind the pears. So every time I do this, I will drop in more color. As long as it's wet, I can get away with it. And I'm carving out the shape of this pear. And before this dries out, I'm grabbing some water. In this case, I grabbed the dirty water, and that's okay. I want some tone in it. And now what I'm going to do is come over to across to the same height and get that water in there. And then I'll work down and meet the background on the other side. And I'm going right up to the edge of the pear. I might have gone too far there, but I can just pull that off. Sometimes. There we go. Now, I've been futzing, so let's get some water in there before this dries out. Okay. And we're going to darken this a little bit. Letting it run down. Letting it run down right to the tape line, and I'll hoover up this bead at the tape line so that it doesn't go too far. And that's as far as I want to take the background. I don't want to try and go darker in this bit. What I am going to do is I've dried out my brush a little bit, and I'm just pulling up some of that color at the bottom of it to give it a softer edge. At least I could do it on that side. I can't do it on the other because it's already dry. Now you can see this is really starting to, it's really made a turn. I do have to darken the shadows. I do have to darken the background, and I think that's going to be my next play. And then we'll do the halftone on the pears. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll come back and We're going to do another glaze into the background, a little bit darker, always going for less. Each time we do this into the shadows, darken this spot, darken under the plate and away, but not the whole thing. This space separating these two pairs, now is a good time to get a dark color in there and halftone it so that you don't have a hard edge up at the top, but having a darker there pushes these guys forward. So we're going to play with those things. Once that's dry, then I'm going to come in and put in that dark color here and that dark color here and here. That really gives the final dimension to the pears. And then last, we'll do splatters and paint the stems in. So we're at about the 2/3 mark. Little more painting to go. We'll do some touch up with white if we need to. But I'm really happy with these. So one more pass at the background after this is dry will be enough darkness to push all that stuff forward. Catch you on the other side. Okay, we're back. One thing I did do while we were away, this area right in here, between the two most front pairs, I darkened and half-toned that to push them forward. Why I did that was simply that area was completely dry and I didn't have to worry about the background, so I went ahead and did it. That's something I want to talk about, is that my process when I'm painting for me or when I'm not recording a video or doing a demo is that I would look for areas that I can continue to work in while something else dries. This painting in video format takes about 2 hours. It's a lot less when I'm working on it, on my own, because I'm not talking. I'm not trying to explain my thought process as I use my thought process. So I just wanted to make that statement. I'm definitely sure that the next thing we need to do is darken the background one more time. I think the shadow values might be okay, so I want to get this darker. We'll get that in there and try and do that in one last shot. And we'll dry that. Then we're going to put the darker halftone in here and do the splatters and the stems of the pears. So we're chugging right along. I'm going to flip this upside down. There. Now you can see the whole thing. Before I start painting, it's important to make sure my wells are charged up. I'm going to need a lot of paint for the background. Takes the most paint, and it's the darkest combination of the colors, so I need it to be fairly strong. So I'm making sure I have plenty, along with plenty of water in my wells. You don't want to try and have to be mixing this stuff while you're putting the wash down. You need to be focused on your wash to be able to make the great things happen that can happen if you're paying attention. But they can only happen if your eyes are on the page and not on the palette mixing up colors. Okay, pretty much everything is charged up. Clean brush full of water. Coming right back to that same spot. Going around the plate. And around the pears. And I'm getting that nice and wet in there. starting to throw in my color. Since the page is tilted, it is running down without me having to force it anywhere, at least in the beginning. Get some more dark in here at this point. And while I've got it, I will try to soften up that edge a little bit. There we go. And this is why you want to have your eyes on the painting and not being mixing colors, because if I had not been paying attention, that could have set. It could have gotten in there too dark and dried too much, and I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. But now, I'm right here. I think I just bumped the microphone with my forehead. Well, it's a big forehead. What can I say? When you're doing this part, you want to be fully locked in to what you're working on. You don't want to have to try and be mixing. You don't want to be thinking about your next steps at this point. I will talk about something after I'm done with this, but not until after I get the wash down. I want it to be darker up in this corner, so I'm dropping some paint in and dotting it and letting it run, and then I'm hoovering up that tape so it doesn't run too much under there. I mean, it doesn't matter because this is in the sketchbook, it's not anywhere else. And coming in with my brush that is, I wet and then I took the water out of it because I want to have that half-toned, softer edge. Come back up here and grab that pooled up paint. There. All right, I really feel like we've now gotten the darkness we need in that background. I'm just going to touch up the edge of the page. It doesn't really need to be done, but what the heck, I'm here. And this is still wet, so I can still drop in some dark. Darken down that corner a little bit. Even along the top. That's about as far as I can go before it starts to get a bloom on me. And I'm not going to touch this because it's too dry. All right. Let's flip it over and see what we got. Yep. I think that's... The dark background is now pushing the pears forward. I do feel that I do now have to darken part of this shadow, probably just to the bottom of the pear, and really it comes under the pear. So like that, and even here a little bit. And This highlight is not pure white, so we're just going to soften that into there. And halftone that edge. It gets lighter as it runs away. And this softens a little bit. We don't want it to be that hard an edge. There. That's pretty good. Same thing here. We're going to run that shadow out under the plate. And I've dampened my brush. I'm softening that bottom edge and that outside edge. Same thing here with this shadow. Dry out that brush. We have plenty of liquid in there to work with now. There we go. All right, that's looking really, 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 really good to me. What do I need to do? I think that the underneath the rim of the plate, need it to be darkened a little bit. And that kind of melts right into the shadow there, which is what I wanted. And then I'm probably going to come in and clean up the highlight on that plate with some white acrylic at the very, very end. Okay. Now, like I was talking about, I can put the halftone in on this pair and this pair, and by the time I'm done with those two, I can probably get to that pair for the shadow. Now, this color is still red, but it's dark. And we're going to get to it. I'm going to warm it up a little bit with some of that orange. And then add some of that Payne's gray to it. And at this point, I'm almost done with the painting, so if I'm mixing in the wells and contaminating the colors, I'm pretty okay with that. I do need some green though, however, for here. Okay. And then we'll start throwing the red color in. So, see now what we're making here is darker. And before I forget, I need to soften up this edge. And I'm narrowing because that highlight is really narrow. But this halftone really does come up to about there. Dry out my brush and pull out some of that paint. And get even more of that darker green color into there. Letting it run. The red and the green naturally make it dark because they're kind of complements. And come in with a cleaner red for up here, because that's in the light, so that's going to have some more pure color. Get your brush damp and soften that edge. That's key. And then come in, soak up that bead before it can get away from you. And then drag your damp brush through here a little bit. Let it lighten up a little bit there. Okay, that pear is pretty much done. That pear is done. That brings us to the halftone on this one and the halftone on this one. And I'll do this one first because then I know I have to go darker on the one next to it. And that highlight isn't pure white, so I need to get rid of that. And then down here, this is that dark. Grab this before it runs. Grab some of this green here. There. And now, soften that edge, soften this edge, pull up that color before it runs away on you. Sometimes this half toning can be a little tough on the brushes, but if you keep them damp and keep them clean, they'll be okay. This needs still more dark down in here and right here. Just hoover that so it doesn't run. Okay, and you've got that nice highlight there, that nice reflected light there. I darkened that back pair on purpose to push the other ones forward. Before I can do this pair, this has to dry. This would be one of those mistakes that would be bad. If I hit here while this is still damp with a thick paint that's coming in here and darker, because you want this darker here to cut this shape out, it would bleed in. So we're gonna let this dry. Come back and do that halftone and the spatters and the stem, and we'll be all done.